Hi, my name is Cora May, and today I'm talking to you guys about the strength of Preservation Evoker going into the next raid in 10.1, which is Aberrus, the Shadowed Crucible. So my guild and I went to every single raid testing there was, and I would say for about 70% of the Mythic raid testing, I was playing Preservation Evoker since this was my main last patch. I don't know if it's going to be my main going forward, but I still feel like I have a pretty good idea of the strengths going into it if you are considering playing Preservation Evoker or not. So before I get into the fights themselves, I do want to talk about the changes that Preservation Evoker is getting on 10.1. Most of the tuning changes that they've done to Preservation Evoker have gone live, like when they buffed and nerfed some of our talents over the past few weeks. There's been quite a few times that they've done those actually since 10.5 and 10.7. But the biggest change is going to be the loss of our current tier set and us getting a new one. So the one that we have right now, the 2-piece, is really powerful. It makes it so that we have increased critical strike chance on our reversions when we cast an Empower spell, which is really nice because then we extend the duration of those reversions, and so that we can keep the whole raid covered in reversions for longer, and then we're getting good value out of Grace Period. However, going forward, the new tier set isn't really constructed around reversion the same way the last one was. Instead, it's going to be leaning more into the actual strength of our Empower spells. So our 2-set Spirit Bloom is going to apply a heal over time effect for 40% of the healing done over 8 seconds. So this is pretty nice. It can also be echoed, so if you do play Resonating Sphere, you can put that out and then have it echo and it stacks. It's not 2 separate hots, it just looks like 1 hot. At the beginning, it was just overwriting it, which was really, really bad. I'm glad they made a change so that it's not a HPS loss in order for you to echo. And then the second part of the 2-set is that Dream Breath's healing is increased by 15%. This is basically just getting an extra point instead of renewing breath, pretty basic. And then for our 4-set, after casting 4 Empower spells, gain Essence Burst immediately and another 3 seconds later. So today, the day I'm recording this, they actually nerfed the 4-set. So before this, it was after casting 3 Empower spells, but now it's been nerfed, so now you have to cast 4 Empower spells, so you're going to be getting less value of it over time. Basically how this works is every single time you cast an Empower spell, you get a stack of Essence Gathering. When it reaches 4, then you're going to get an Essence Burst immediately and another 3 seconds later. All my stuff's on CD, so I can't show you. It'd be nice if it was still 3 for this video. But yeah, so this tier set is pretty good, I think. I think the 2-set, again, is more powerful than the 4-set, similar to how it was in Vault, where the 2-set was a lot of healing and the 4-set was kind of meh. When I killed Mythic Razagath, I didn't even have 4-set on my Evoker, and I don't think it mattered. It was mostly a damage loss. Now, keeping that in mind, it is important that we are losing damage going into this patch, just because we are losing our 4-set, so that's something to also talk about with the strength of our class. So when I first read this tier set, my first thought was, this to me feels like they are trying to lean us into a Noise Dormu's playstyle, because if we're increasing the strength of our Empower spells, we should be wanting to cast our Empower spells more, and the more Empower spells we get, then the more 4-set procs we get. So that is basically what I've been testing, is a Noise Dormu's build, and I've also been mixing that with the kind of Emerald Blossom build. Okay, so these are the talents for the most part that I was testing with. This is not your set talents going into the new patch. These are just the ones that I had the most success with testing with. So when you're testing, it's a little bit not as conducive to prog healing. Things that look good on testing don't always end up looking good inside of prog healing, because you don't know the timings and you're just testing mechanics out, and most of the fights aren't lasting more than, depending on the boss you're testing, aren't lasting more than 2 minutes. So keeping that all in mind, I did try to cut a few different things, but this is the one that I kind of landed on. And there are some pros and cons. Before I get into that, I'm going to talk to you about what I took. So again, like I said, I'm taking those Dormus, and then I am taking Emerald Blossom talents, so Fluttering Seedlings, Field of Dreams, and Cycle of Life. I'm also choosing to take Ouroboros because I am still casting some hard echoes, especially when I do want to do a Lifebind ramp. And then I kind of have 2 extra free points to play with after I have those bases covered, of course, being Dreamflight and Cycle of Life. You will notice that I do not take Stasis in this one. I did see some other Evokers playing Stasis, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The other big thing you'll probably notice is that I'm taking Empath instead of Spiritual Clarity. It probably reads oh, Spiritual Clarity is going to be this, and I may be wrong about this, but I was having an easier time playing Empath because I need the extra essence in order to disintegrate to get mana back, because this is a very mana hungry build. And since you're getting Essence Burst so often from the 4 set, it feels like you're getting really good value out of Exploding Burst. I think you could go either way. I think it mostly comes down to the timing of the fight, how much you need the mana. Like, there are so many things that could, like, decide between these two talents, but for the most part, I think I was enjoying Empath more in testing. So the idea here is basically just to cast your Empower spells as much as possible, get as many of those 4-piece procs for Essence Burst as possible, and be like spending those on like Emerald Blossom, and then when there's not any healing to do, be spending that essence on Disintegrate. So a lot different than our current playstyle, which is usually just like putting out like Resonating Sphere and like applying like reversions everywhere. I would say the biggest downfall of this build is that I don't want to say Grace Period is dead points, but since you aren't like echoing into reversioning as often, you're getting a lot less reversions out there. Like, I am still making sure I'm putting a point inside of Golden Hour because I still think that's really good value. However, I'm getting a lot less reversion healing. This is from like our last poll on, what is this? Oh, Shock. Last poll on Shock, so you can see like reversion is below like Renewing Blaze. Like, I did very, very little for me, and like Golden Hour is going to be even lower. So those do kind of feel like dead points, but there is a lot of healing to be had elsewhere. You could also consider doing a build where you are taking, let's say, Resonating Sphere, and then taking 20-second Spirit Bloom, and you could skip like Cycle of Life and go towards like Stasis and stuff like that if you want to do that, and then it just be using those echoes from the TA in order to be duplicating the hot that comes from Spirit Bloom. That was something I did try on some bosses, and I did not think it was very good. There's a lot of people who are saying like, oh yeah, that's gonna be like really good, and maybe I'm wrong, but I was just not really feeling it. It is probably though a bit more viable as far as like your mana pool and stuff though. I'm gonna show you that a little bit in the plane, like in the videos that I have about how mana hungry the build that I was playing was, though I think it was like really good healing. And if you're, once you learn the fights where you need to heal and finding those spots where you can disintegrate because you're getting a lot of extra essence bursts from your 4 set and just the amount of empower spells that you are casting, then I think it's manageable. I think there's gonna be several different playstyles though. I think there is gonna be one where you're like echoing and using Spirit Blossom hot. This one with like Emerald Blossoms. I wish they weren't both called Blossom at the end because it's so confusing. People say like, oh, big blossoms and echoing blossoms and like all these different things. When you look at how people talk about builds, it's so confusing, and I'm probably confusing you by talking about it right now, so I'm going to try to avoid that. But and then you can also consider that since they did nerf our 4 set, there is a possibility that we just keep our 2 set on from last year, because our 2 set alone is so powerful and you don't need our 4 set, and then our 2 set in this new tier is also pretty powerful, so maybe we just mix 2 and 2. That is something that I'm not really sure if it'll be worth dropping that eye level for, but I could see a world where that happens as well. So those are like the 3 main things that are like basically on my mind. Is number 1, like the kind of nose door moves thing that I was showing you with this, and then number 2 being something like this, and then where you're like echoing your Spirit Blossom, and then the 3rd one being something similar to our current playstyle, and then just also just taking like the extra like healing from Spirit Blossom and like Dream Breath, and just letting Grace Period kind of like carry it, of course, and going that way. There's a lot of options and directions that I could see this class going. Okay, so now that I've talked to you about that, I do want to say that I'm mostly just going to talk about going forward the playstyle that I was playing in retesting instead of addressing the others, because I don't really have good footage for that. When I tested the other one, this one with Spirit Blossom, it was on, oh my god, it was like the Void Walker bosses, and I can't remember their names. What was it? Oh, the Amalgamation Chamber. That was the one where I was testing the Spirit Blossom thing, and I was not having a good time. I was just like bottom fragging the entire time that I was trying to make it work. So, and I haven't really seen like amazing logs from other evokers making it work yet, but I'm sure that someone's gonna make it look good. Anyways, so I want to get into some video with you guys, and then at the end I want to kind of talk about where I think this puts Evoker in the grand scheme of things, because I know that's like one of the big questions you probably have. Okay, so this is from the last retesting we did. I think this is probably our last poll. Yes, okay. So the main idea here going into every single one of these polls, I think I started out this testing playing like Resto Druid or something. Didn't I? Yeah, I started playing Resto Druid, and then I think like halfway through, I switched to the end. I just did Evoker. Like I said, I've been trying to like test multiple healers on every single fight as much as I can. So, but what I settled on for as far as doing this fight is this is the fight that probably has the most like AoE damage, and it's like the closest to like a vigilant like guardian type of fight that we're going to get. Like a nice like big like healing check, and it's a nice DPS check for everyone and stuff like that. And like there are mechanics, but it's not like super mechanically heavy. It just feels like really strong healing and damage. So the first thing I do is I go in and I do a flame breath. First tick of damage goes out, then I do a dream breath. So right now I have 2 stacks of the essence, so it's 2 stacks of the thing that's going to give me essence burst at the end. Remember, this was from last week, so this is only had to get to 3 in order for me to get my essence burst from my 4-piece, and now it's going to be 4, which I think is going to be really, really awkward. I hope they change their mind about that, because I don't understand why they would make that change and nerf the 4-piece when it wasn't that sick to begin with. So this guy is going to go and drop this pull over here, and this is going to do some group-wide damage, which I Spirit Blossom. And then now I have the Essence Burst stack, the first one from my 4-piece, and then I'm going to get another one in 3 seconds. So I'm going to start putting out Echoes, and then I'm going to Emerald Communion ramp this first one. The most awkward thing about these kinds of builds is finding the time where you could Emerald Communion ramp, because normally I would never try an Emerald Communion until like a little bit later. It'd be like easier to set up, but because it's so annoying to set up, I always want to set it up when there's like very little damage going out, and in this case in most fights that's going to be like towards the beginning. So I think that's already like a -1 to like Evoker, that like they're trying to front load some of their CDs just to make them feel powerful and good. You know, Emerald Communion, even if it's not ramped that well, it's still gonna be really good. We get an Absorb on us. I did not get to test if this Absorb bugs out the same way that it does on Razageth, where if you Lifeline before the Absorb goes out, then Lifeline does no healing. And then Emerald Communion this, and then after we do this, you get a dot on you that you need to run into the center to clear, and when you do that, it does a small amount of AoE damage, so everybody here is still taking damage. And I need to find my way into the middle after I press this Dream Breath. Unfortunately, I did let my Living Flame stacks there drop. And then after this, I think we get some soaks, if I remember correctly. And also dodging these things the whole time. So everybody's gonna go stand in one, everybody's standing in one. I think this is usually where I rewind. Yep, so I go ahead and rewind here. I think the next damage event is where I Dream Flight. Oh, okay, actually I die as soon as I press Dream Flight. That's so sick. Alright, so then I get res. Very cool. Very, very cool. That's so funny. I didn't watch this before I selected this poll. I remember that now. I love dying mid Dreamflight animation, and that's basically it. It's just me like out of this, just like using my Essence Burst towards Emerald Blossoms, trying to feed into my cycle of life as much as I can, dodging, and then just pressing my Empower spells like off CD, and then making sure I'm not pressing my TA until my like major Empower spells are on CD. Because like TA is mostly here not as like a heal or like an absorb, but just here as something to like CDR, like your big Empower spells. And then right here is just like this boss is like venting or whatever, and it's like heavy AoE damage. So like I said, this is like the most healing in a fight. So like I'm doing decent HPS here, but the thing I want you to look at is my mana pool. I'm at 30% mana. We've been in this fight for 2 minutes. So that is what I mean by this build being really good healing, and a lot of this, and I'll pull up, I think I have the logs pulled up actually. Yeah. Okay, so these are my logs for the poll. This poll is about to end because we're about to get ported out, because this is the last poll of the night. Or I mean of the testing. It was at nighttime. Yeah, of course it's out. So just so you can get an idea of what the healing breakdown looks like for that. So it shows Emerald Blossom as being the highest heal. This is extremely misleading, and I wish that Warcraft logs wouldn't present it this way. So Emerald Blossom did 26,000 HPS out of the entire that we're showing, but it also includes Cycle of Life and Panacea. So Cycle of Life is basically like Cloudburst. If you aren't familiar with it because you haven't played Emerald Blossom before, because you aren't cringe, Cycle of Life, every 3 Emerald Blossoms leaves behind a tiny sprout, which gathers 15% of your healing over 10 seconds. The sprout then heals allies within 30 yards, divided evenly among targets. So this is basically like Cloudburst, but for Evokers. And it captures all healing. So like, I think it's really misleading to present it underneath Emerald Blossom, because it's more like a mix between you are proccing Cloudburst, but you're proccing it the same way that a Resto Druid procs Tree of Life by pressing 3 Swift Mends. In this case, you're pressing 3 Emerald Blossoms to proc Cycle of Life. So it would be like if you looked at like Resto Druid healing and they presented the healing done by Tree of Life underneath Swift Mend or something. Like I think it's silly. Anyways, Cycle of Life captures all healing. So like it captures, you know, Spirit Blossom, Dream Breath, Healthstone, Health Pot, Renewing Blaze, Rewind, Dream Flight. Like all of your other spells, it's just something that is enabled by you pressing Emerald Blossom. So a little bit misleading, I think, when you look at logs and you're like, wow, Emerald Blossom is just doing so much healing. If they're taking Cycle of Life, please take the time to click on it and look at how much of it is Cycle of Life. So you get really good uptime on Cycle of Life. My biggest problem with this talent is its interaction with Field of Dreams. So I'm the kind of person who likes predictability, pull to pull. I press my spells the same like order every single pull. So when you are playing a shaman, because I used to main a shaman for a long time, you press Cloudburst at the same time every single pull, because you know it's going to detonate at the right time into healing, and not just detonate at a time when you don't need healing. Sometimes that means pressing it before the damage goes out, and just to make sure that it goes off at the right time. But since Cycle of Life can proc from Field of Dreams, it makes it really hard for you to predictably put down your Cycle of Lives where you want them, when you want them, so that you can start like being like, oh, okay, I'm going to like do a Spree of Bloom into a Dream Flight here. Let me press this, and I have 2 stacks of Cycle of Life. Let me press my next one so that I can have Cycle of Life be put down on the ground like a Cloudburst and capture all that healing and then detonate when there's more damage coming out in 10 seconds. However, that gets ruined if I'm like, okay, I'm going to prep for when that's going to happen, and I go to press the second one and then it procs. And then it's like, well, now I need to press it 3 more times, but that damage is coming out in 8 seconds and I don't have enough essence. Like, that is so frustrating to me. So I have really mixed feelings about this interaction, because on one hand, I know many of you guys are thinking, well, more Cycle of Lives is better. Like, that's just more healing. And it's like, maybe, or maybe it's just more overhealing. And, you know, it's just like all getting wasted and it's not predictable. And that's just how I feel about it. I don't like that type of like RNG factor, because I feel like Cycle of Life could have some really good skill expression inside of it, like planning ahead, like I was saying. But Field of Dreams really just like squashes all of that for me and takes a lot of the fun out of the build, I think. The fact that these trigger Cycle of Life, even though it's less, I understand it's more healing the more Cycle of Lives, but I still find it bothersome. Okay. Okay, I think that was about all I had to say about the VOD. In that, I was running these talents that I was right here, and then we were talking a little bit about the healing breakdown. Okay, yeah. I got distracted for a second. Okay, so then right after Emerald Blossom, Dream Breath is second. That's no surprise. Dream Breath has always been a heavy hitter, basically, but especially since it's now doing an extra 15%, it's going to be really, really good. The Lifeline healing is not usually going to be this high for this build. It's just because, like I showed you, I Emerald Communion that first like big damage event. Like the first like heal absorbs we get that we need to heal off inside the soak. That is where I set up my Emerald Communion, because there's not a lot of damage going on beforehand to make it so that I can actually hard cast echoes to get my lifelines out. And then I got a 2 million rewind, so that is one button doing 2 million. It's really good, and part of the reason it's going to be really good going into next tier is because of the change they made about a week and a half ago, where they increased our health and damage taken by 25%, similar to the way that they did at the beginning of Dragonflight, or right before Dragonflight release, because again, healers are too powerful, there just wasn't enough to heal. That's also why I chose this one. Like, I have a bunch of other examples here of like bosses that we tested, and I mean, some of these are pretty good. However, you can see like the numbers are quite a bit lower than what I just showed you. I mean, 120, 130k-ish. But because the other boss I'm showing you is after they made that change, I feel like this last one was like a better example. This one I think was pretty good for as far as like an example of like where I really wanted consistent cycle of life timings for like the damage events that were going on, and I was finding myself getting really frustrated with like getting the procs like I did just right there, and then like having my stacks be thrown off and like not knowing when it was going off, and maybe having it going off at like some bad times. Though it was still like, I think Evoker did like decently well on this fight, and this was also like the first day I think I was testing Evoker Mythic raid. Before this I've been playing like Priest of Druid to test those out. Anyways, I keep getting distracted. I like to ramble a lot. Rewind, temporal anomaly. This is like no echoes from this. This is just the pure like absorb value that we're getting. I really like the fact that they nerfed the absorb value on it, so it's not so dominant anymore. Spirit Bloom. So it has 3 different things now because there's like a hot portion as well. And then Emerald Communion, like Fluttering Seedlings kind of does like okay healing. Also, another good thing to note is like Panacea, if you're playing Emerald Blossom, really valuable self-healing in order to keep like you having high like mastery value the entire fight. So Panacea, like when you play Emerald Blossom, you just get like higher mastery value like as a bonus to playing the Emerald Blossom build, which I think is also really, really good. Okay, now talking about where I think this puts Evoker as far as how meta it's going to be. So right now it looks like the meta is going to be Windus Priest, 1 H-Spell, I know, wow, that's surprising, and then a Resto Shaman, and then assuming, you know, like it's mostly a 4 heal tier, it's like less clear what that 4th healer is going to be. So going into this tier, I'm actually going to be playing Holy Priest for the most part, because I think that is actually going to be the 4th slot. I think that Holy Priests have been doing really well in testing when I've tested them, even though they just caught another nerf last week, they're still doing really, really good. And it's also like, how much healing something like an Evoker, a Mystery or Resto Druid does always just shows up straight on your meters, but for like Priest, Shaman, Paladin, like their healing and their value like doesn't always show up directly on the meters, and like Priests are already doing like a lot, if not often more than Evokers are doing right now, and then also they're bringing symbols, which is giving mana, giving back people defensives, not to mention things like the bonus healing that come from Divine Hymn aren't showing up. So I could definitely see, depending on how the last boss is, it being Holy Priest for the 4th slot. It's really hard to predict though what the 4th slot is going to be though until we see that last boss. On the last boss, it does look like there are some massive spell mechanics. It looks like there are 2 massive spell mechanics. Again, not really like easy to tell until you actually get there. Let's see. Yeah, so Sargeras puts out this magic effect, and then when you dispel it, it knocks people away and it does damage to them. This kind of reads similar to Ner'zhul to me, if you remember that from Sanctum of Domination. There's also another debuff in stage 1, Searing Breath, which is just a AoE ticking dot that can also be massive spell if you need to. So that's also like a possibility. So I could see it being Holy Priest. They did buff Holy Paladin. Some people are saying it could be double Holy Paladin, though I don't really think it will be that. It's possible though, anything's possible. You could see 2 discs, both those things are doing good. The Sewer's been doing good, Resto Druid's been doing good. The thing is that like nothing right now looks bad. And that should be really good news if you aren't sure what to play. It's because it seems like it's going to be pretty hard for you to pick wrong. It's not really like super clear cut like what the meta is going to be. I think it is pretty clear cut. It's gonna be like at least 1 disc, 1 HPAL, most likely a Resto Shaman. But I think that 4th slot can be super flexible, and it could definitely be Evoker. And there are a few different builds that are viable. I think it would be exciting to try and experiment with them and try them. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry for rambling so much, but if you've been here before, you know that's how I am. And good luck next year.